Hey there gardeners, Chris here from Garden Steading. I've just planted my rhubarb, which is covered in a separate video as far as kind of the do's and don'ts, and now I want to talk about some companion plants for my rhubarb. Now obviously it's not a bad idea to plant them all together if you're looking for inspiration, but it can go either way. If you've already got some of these companion plants and you want to add something like a rhubarb, that's going to work. If you've already got a rhubarb and you're looking for something to accompany it, these are going to be good options. And I've also got a plant here, which is for a totally separate part of the garden. However, it is a plant that is the opposite of a good companion. It is something that you do not want to grow anywhere near your rhubarb, apparently. All of this is online advice. I'd take some of it with a pinch of salt. However, I've seen most of this stuff recommended in different places. So there's a bit of common advice as to what's good. And also, I'd be very, very careful using Google AI, because when I first started looking for companion plants, quite often the Google AI was actually recommending the plants that were said to be the worst companions, and they were lumping them in with the best. And not that that's particularly surprising with AI, because it's pretty dumb, but something to watch out for. So maybe cross-check your recommendations. So yeah, that's pumpkin. Do not grow pumpkin or melons apparently with your rhubarb, which shouldn't be that hard to avoid, I would imagine. I'm actually going to try and plant that pumpkin in another part of the garden and just let it go and see if I get anything. But on to our actual recommendations. Number one, sage. And now the reason I was very keen to pick up another sage for this project is because we have a little bit of trouble growing it, and essentially that's, I think, because we get a bit of powdery mildew because it's very high humidity where I am, and as a result it doesn't always do that well. And the variegated sage got eaten by pests. I do believe the sage recommendation is because it can deter pests from your rhubarb, and so that's always a good option. We're also going to talk about things in kind of the onion category. So we've got chives here. So that was one of the recommendations. Again, it'll help keep pests away from your rhubarb. So that is probably a good addition. One thing that I've had a lot of trouble with is growing onions from seeds. I just can't get the results. They sometimes come up, but generally don't do anything. So I've bought a punnet of red onions, which I'd be quite excited to eat, and also is apparently, and to be honest, they didn't directly recommend red onions, they just said onions, but I'm assuming red onions fall into that same category. And so we're going to be planting some red onions in here with our rhubarb. Brassicas is a pretty broad family. I'm not actually sure if the perpetual spinach directly falls into that, but I would imagine so, which is why I bought this perpetual spinach. And obviously it's important, if you're putting companion plants in, don't just put in companion plants for the sake of it. Try and plant something that is also going to be edible or useful to you, and that's why we've got the perpetual spinach here. And I reckon it will just go over here, because the brassicas, what they do is they can attract pests that would otherwise ravage your rhubarb, and instead they'll attack those things instead. And since most people would definitely say rhubarb is more important than salad, that's a good trade-off. Again, looking back at the onions, we've got spring onions, something that I'm interested in growing. And again, it just seems like a pretty commonsensical thing that might help deter pests, and we can hope that they're all going to be pretty happy growing together. One of the other really big recommendations was strawberries. And so strawberries provide a ground cover. They can help weed prevention, because obviously if they grow well, they will cover the ground and prevent weeds from cropping up, or at least make it a little bit harder for those weeds to get really established. And everyone loves strawberries, I imagine, apart from people allergic to them. Part of the reason I was so keen to buy strawberries is, number one, I've not had the best success. They've died in other parts of the garden. And number two, one of the other really good companions, apparently, for rhubarb is asparagus. And strawberries are a good companion for both asparagus and rhubarb. And so these are going to go up in the garden bed with just those two plants at the moment. And hopefully they will do their stuff there. They'll grow well. And yeah, we'll hope for a good result. So that is a little bit of a rundown of the companion plants that I've bought. However, there are other options as well, and let's have a little bit of a chat about them while I plant these. So another option for you is beets. And apparently, interestingly enough, these actually help the flavor of your rhubarb if they're planted nearby, which is quite an interesting concept. Don't know how true it is. And they will also be shaded by the rhubarb, which helps the beets in turn. And both of these are pretty water hungry and pretty fertilizer hungry. So it's also probably going to be a pretty good combo in putting those two together, because they're going to both benefit from that kind of regimen. As far as the brassicas, I already talked about my perpetual spinach. However, there's lots and lots of options. And just to give you a couple, broccoli, kale, kohlrabi, cabbage, cauliflower. Again, they attract the pests, and that's a bit of a double-edged sword. Also, beans, and I think we might be putting some beans in. I'm not sure how close they will be to our rhubarb. However, that is another good option for you. And obviously, beans are always a good crop. Strawberries we've mentioned, sage we've mentioned, asparagus we've mentioned, the onions we've mentioned, and the chives we've mentioned. Another one is dill, and apparently, again, good pest repellent, and it'll help break up the soil for your rhubarb, which just helps. And that is another pretty cool addition. Dill is very useful in the kitchen. As far as the things to avoid, and I am going to say that twice, plants to avoid putting near your rhubarb is dock, corn, melons, pumpkins that I've already mentioned, cucumbers and tomatoes. So keep that in mind.